Whenever we think about ancient Sparta, our minds usually jump straight to the battlefield, right? We picture the shields, the spears, and these legendary soldiers trained to absolutely never surrender. But how did they actually get that way? Well, in this explainer, we're looking at the legendary Spartan lawgiver, Lycurgus. And we aren't just going to look at him as some dusty historical figure from the 9th to 7th century BC. No, we're going to view him as a master architect of human behavior. Pulling directly from Plutarch's famous Parallel Lives, we're going to explore how one man designed an entire civilization, literally from the ground up.
This brings up a truly fascinating, almost unsettling question. Can you actually design human character? I mean, really think about that for a second. Can you build a set of laws and institutions that are so perfectly engineered they completely eliminate human greed and inequality? Well, Plutarch presents Lycurgus as exactly that, a moral engineer, someone who theoretically designed a society's daily habits to do exactly that. He didn't just sit around writing laws, he shaped the very environment in which human character forms.
Okay, let's dive into this blueprint. We'll be looking at the reluctant lawgiver, the 3 pillars of equality, dining as a social leveler, the aug-age education system, and finally, the lawgiver's final trick.
Part 1. The Reluctant Lawgiver. A choice of power versus virtue.
So Lycurgus was born into Sparta's highly unique dual kingship system. When his brother stepped down, the path was completely clear for Lycurgus to just take the throne. But there was a catch. His sister-in-law was pregnant. He faced a massive, life-altering choice. Claim absolute power by just staying silent, or wait. Well, he chose virtue. He made sure the infant was born safely and then immediately crowned his newborn nephew, Charielus, who became known as the Joy of the People. Having solidly established his moral credibility with that move, he voluntarily left Sparta to travel. He spent his time studying foreign constitutions all across the Mediterranean. It was basically the ultimate education for his political imagination.
Moving to Part 2. 3 pillars of equality. Engineering the state.
When Lycurgus finally returned to Sparta, he brought back a structural blueprint. His first pillar was political. He created the Gerousia, or the Senate. This was a council made up of exactly 28 elder citizens. When you added the 2 kings to the mix, you had a council of 30. Plutarch uses a brilliant metaphor for this. He describes the Senate as being like ballast in a ship. You see, you had the strong, sometimes tyrannical temper of the kings on one side, and the highly changeable, volatile moods of the popular assembly on the other. The Gerousia sat right there in the middle, stabilizing the entire government. It was an absolutely ingenious system of checks and balances way before the modern era.
Now, what's really interesting here is the math behind his second pillar. It is staggering. Lycurgus managed to somehow persuade the citizens to entirely give up their private land holdings. He took the Spartan territory and chopped it up into exactly 9,000 equal plots, one for every single Spartan citizen. I mean, just imagine trying to pull off a massive wealth redistribution like that today.
But he didn't just hand them the land and walk away. He strictly capped what that land could do for them. Each of these 9,000 plots produced a fixed annual income. You got a specific amount of grain, a specific amount of wine, and a specific amount of oil. It was exactly enough to comfortably feed a family and absolutely no more. By establishing this very rigid baseline of equality, he made it structurally impossible for any citizen to accumulate excess wealth. You couldn't buy your neighbor's plot, and you sure couldn't hoard extra grain to sell for a profit later.
The third pillar was the economy. And honestly, this is a real game changer. Lycurgus completely banned all gold and silver, replacing it entirely with iron money. He minted iron coins that were so physically heavy and of such incredibly low value that accumulating just 20 pounds of currency required a spare closet to store it. Want to buy something expensive? You'd literally need a team of oxen to drag your wallet to the market. It's absurd, but it was devastatingly effective. Foreign merchants totally vanished, and craftsmen just stopped making luxury goods because no one could physically pay for them. The entire luxury economy simply ceased to exist.
Part 3. Dining as social leveler, the Sycidius.
Lycurgus realized pretty quickly that controlling the money just wasn't enough. You had to control daily social habits, too. By law, a citizen could no longer dine comfortably at home. Every single Spartan man was assigned to a mess hall of exactly 15 men, and he had to eat his daily meals with them. And every month, each man had to contribute exact provisions to the group. We're talking 1 bushel of meal, 8 gallons of wine, 5 pounds of cheese, and 2 pounds of figs. Breaking bread together daily under this quiet, constant social pressure was the ultimate equalizer.
A rich guy couldn't show off his fancy imported foods or golden plates at dinner because the table was shared and the menu was identical for everyone. Plutarch notes that this daily routine was far more powerful than any written law when it came to neutralizing the display of wealth.
Now, as you might guess, the wealthier citizens absolutely hated this. They fought it tooth and nail. But here's the genius part. Lycurgus didn't use the military to force them into compliance. He won them over through immense patience and strict self-discipline. He literally invited his most stubborn opponents to observe his own life, showing them firsthand that he was sitting there eating the exact same figs and cheese as the poorest citizen. He merged public law with private virtue, essentially proving that the system wasn't some kind of punishment, it was an ideal they were all striving for together.
Which brings us to part 4, the Agog education system, the generational factory.
A system this strict relies entirely on the people inside it. To make it last, Lycurgus built a generational factory. At age 7, boys were taken from their homes to live under strict common discipline. They gathered their own rush bedding by hand and wore plain clothing all year round. As youths, they were closely supervised by an older teen known as an ädhering. Now, they learned only the absolute basics of reading. The true focus was purely on physical endurance and brief, what we call laconic speech. The goal here wasn't to teach a trade, it was to build character. Lycurgus engineered their upbringing so thoroughly that by adulthood, instinctive obedience was quite literally the only life they knew.
And finally, Part 5, the lawgiver's final trick, locking the Constitution.
So Lycurgus had successfully engineered a society of equals, but he knew he needed to permanently lock this constitution in place so that future politicians couldn't meddle with his life's work, and this brilliantly illustrates his strategic mind. Here was his final act. First, he made all citizens swear a solemn oath to observe his laws without any alteration until he returned from a journey. Second, he traveled to the oracle at Delphi, which confirmed his laws would make Sparta globally renowned. Third, he sent that written prophecy right back home. And fourth, he never went back. He remained in voluntary exile, essentially starving himself to death away from his beloved home. He legally and religiously trapped the citizens in their own promise. They simply couldn't break their sacred word.
And you know what? It worked. I want to read this powerful assessment directly from Plutarch because it hits the nail on the head. He wrote that Lycurgus's institutions continued for above 500 years like some deep and thoroughly ingrained tincture, retaining their hold upon the nation. 5 whole centuries. The Sparta that the rest of Greece eventually came to fear and deeply respect, the exact same Sparta that held the line at Thermopylae and fought the Peloponnesian War, was entirely the product of Lycurgus's moral engineering.
So the crucial point to take away from all of this isn't just a fun history lesson about ancient Greece. It's a profound insight into how systems shape human behavior. Lycurgus proved that changing the economic structure and the physical environment fundamentally changes the people themselves. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question. If Lycurgus designed the institutions of Sparta to produce highly self-disciplined warriors, what habits are our own modern economic and political institutions designing for us? Are we being engineered by the structures around us without even realizing it? Keep questioning the systems around you.